to Summer Reading Virtual Storytime. Our theme this week is Medieval Tales, and I'm really excited to have my friend Lee Freeman here with me today. Lee is our local history and genealogist here at the library, and he's also a part of the Alabama Renaissance Fair. Lee, can you tell us just a little bit about that?
Well, the Alabama Renaissance Fair is the state's official Alabama Renaissance Fair. We were founded in 1987, and we're dedicated to celebrating everything that's cool about medieval and Renaissance history. So that's from the year 410 AD, long time ago, to about 1550 AD. So we pick up knights and kings, and we do King Arthur, we do the Emperor Charlemagne, we do knights and damsels. We have a troll that used to come to our Renaissance Fair, so it's a lot of fun.
That does sound like a lot of fun, Lee. I always enjoy going to the Renaissance Fair every year. It's always so much fun.
Yeah, unfortunately, this year we had to call it off, to cancel it because of the virus. People were worried about a possible outbreak, and we want everybody to be safe.
Absolutely. We know that. That's why we're doing our virtual program.
So we're going to do some online stuff later in the year, so the kids and their parents can be watching out for that.
I think that'll be great.
In the meantime, we do have a Facebook page that they can like and check out, and a website.
Okay, I'll be sure to link that under our video here. For our story today, I'm going to be reading Good Night, Good Night. You look like a good night today, Lee.
Thank you, good lady.
Good Night by Shelley Moore Thomas and pictures by Jennifer Plekas. This book is published by Puffin Books. Once, there were 3 little dragons. They lived in a dark cave. The cave was in a dense forest. The forest was in a faraway kingdom. The poor little dragons were very lonely in their deep, dark cave. In the kingdom, there was a good knight, and every night he kept watch. He watched from a crumbly, tumbly tower. He was on top of a very tall wall. One night, the good knight was on his watch, and he heard a very large, very loud roar. So the good knight left the crumbly, tumbly tower. He climbed down the very tall wall. He jumped on his horse. Away, he said, and he galloped through the king's forest. Clippity-clop, clippity-clop. He came to the deep, dark cave, and inside he saw the first little dragon. "What's this?" he asked. "Thinks it's a dragon," and he drew his shimmery glimmery sword. The dragon had on his jammies. He was all ready for bed. "Oh, good, you've come," said the dragon. "Could you bring me a drink of water, please? Then I can go to sleep." The good knight did not know what to think, but he was a good knight, and so he got a drink of water and he gave it to the dragon. Then he tucked him into bed. "Good night, good dragon. Sleep well, sleep tight," said the good knight, and then he galloped away. The good knight went back through the king's forest. Clippity-clop, clippity-clop, and he got off his horse, thud, and he climbed up the very tall wall to the crumbly, tumbly tower, and there he stood on watch. He stood on watch for 5 minutes, and then he heard another very large, very loud roar. "I don't believe this," he said. He left the crumbly, tumbly tower. He climbed down the very tall wall. He jumped on his horse. "Away!" he cried, and he galloped through the king's forest. Clippity-clop, clippity-clop. He came to the deep, dark cave, and there was the second dragon in her jammies. She was all ready for bed. "Oh, good, you've come," said the second dragon. "Could you read me a story, please? Then I can go to sleep." "Could I have another drink of water?" said the first dragon. The good knight did not know what to think, but he was a good knight, and so he read the dragon a story, Once Upon a Time, and then he tucked her into bed. He got the first dragon another drink of water, and then he tucked him into bed. "Good night, good dragons. Sleep well, sleep tight," said the good knight, and then he galloped away. The good knight went back through the king's forest. Clippity-clop, clippity-clop. He got off his horse, thud, He climbed up the very tall wall to the crumbly-tumbly tower, and there he stood on watch. He stood on watch for 2 minutes, and then he heard another very large, very loud roar! "This is too much," he said. He left the crumbly-tumbly tower. He climbed down the very tall wall. He jumped on his horse. "Away!" he cried, and he galloped through the king's forest. Clippity-clop, clippity-clop. He came to the deep, dark cave, and the third dragon had on his jammies. He was all ready for bed. "Oh, good, you've come," said the third dragon. "Could you sing me a song, please? Then I can go to sleep." And could you read me another story?" said the second dragon. "And could you get me another drink of water?" said the first dragon. The good knight did not know what to think, but he was a good knight, so he sang the dragon a story, a song. "Go to sleep, go to sleep," and then he tucked him into bed. Then he read the second dragon another story, "Once upon a time," and then he tucked her into bed. He got the first dragon another drink of water. Then he tucked him into bed. "Good night, good dragons. Sleep well, sleep tight," said the good knight. And then he galloped away. The good knight went back through the king's forest. Clippity-clop, clippity-clop. He got off of his horse. Thud! He climbed up the very tall wall to the crumbly-tumbly tower, and there he stood on watch. He stood on watch for 1 minute, and then he heard the largest, loudest roar of all. "Roar!" "Not again," said the good knight. He left the crumbly-tumbly tower. He climbed down the very tall wall. He jumped on his horse. "Away!" he cried, and he galloped through the king's forest. Clippity-clop, clippity-clop. He came to the deep, dark cave. "Oh, good, you've come," said all three dragons. "Let me guess," said the good knight. Another drink of water?" "No," said the first dragon. "Another story?" "No," said the second dragon. "Another song?" "No," said the third dragon. "Then what do you want?" cried the good knight. "We need a good night kiss," said the little dragons, and they lifted their scaly little cheeks. "This is going too far," said the good knight. But he was a good knight, so he bent and kissed each scaly little cheek. "Good night, good dragons. Sleep well, sleep tight," he said, and the dragons said, "Good night, good night." The good knight left the cave. He waited outside. He heard the loud dragon snores. Shh. Then the good knight went home through the king's forest. Clippity-clop, clippity-clop. He got off his horse. "Good. Now," said the good knight, "maybe I can get a good night's sleep." And that's just what he did. Sleep well, sleep tight. Good night. The end. I hope you guys liked that story. I think it's so much fun. Mr. Lee, you've got a few things that a good knight might have, right?
I do. And actually, let me tell you, my medieval persona is Lord Dickon of Barnesdale.
Oh, wow.
So that's the name that I go by, one of my characters for Renaissance Month. So I'm the under-sheriff, which means the deputy sheriff of the Kingdom of Firenze. So we do have some things that a good knight would have used on the table. We have some swords. This is the one that Lord Dickon normally uses. And these are all real swords. So I don't have actual sharp edges on them for safety reasons, but I could if I wanted to. So we've got different kinds of swords on the table. That's the main weapon that any good knight would have, that generally is custom made for the knight by the blacksmith. So it's custom made for his weight, for his build, so you can wield it all day and not get tired. Most people think medieval swords are really heavy, but they're not. The good ones are hand forged and hand tempered. So this sword right here weighs like 2 pounds. It's incredible how light that is.
That's really cool.
They had different kinds of swords. This is the earliest sword. This has the smith's name, Ulfbert, that made the sword inlaid into the blade. It's called an Ulfbert sword. This is from about 900 AD. So this is one of my favorite swords. It's a little bit early for the kind of knights we're talking about, but it's one of my favorite swords. And we have some chainmail. This is the standard armor for most of the medieval period. So this is what knights would be wearing from, well, the ancient Celts in 100 AD had chainmail, and knights were wearing this all the way up through the 1600s.
Now, did that keep them safe?
That was armor. It's the standard pattern is 4 rings passing through a 5th ring, and if you hit that with a sword, it won't go through it unless you hit it really hard, really repeatedly. So what you do is you put this arming cap on over it. Let's see if I can do this. So a good knight would usually have a squire that would help him to arm himself. So Lord Deacon may not be able to do this without his squire.
Do you need me to be your squire?
If you can help me pull the chainmail down over. Okay, there we go.
There we go.
You can barely see my face in that, but that's why you have a squire to put this on. So I'm going to take this off. The arming cap cushions your head in case you get hit wearing just the mail. It'll hurt a lot more. So this cushions your head. So you can also wear this with this helmet. This is a kettle hat. This is a standard kind of knight's helmet that all classes of men-at-arms and even knights could wear. So it's not quite as restricting as some of these later helmets. The helmets got more sophisticated, the armor and the weapons got more sophisticated. So we start out wearing chainmail, which they had shirts, pants, and helmet or headpieces, hoods made out of chainmail. And then they invented plate armor. You'll see some of the knights in those book covers wearing plate armor. That was really a lot more sophisticated. By about 1325, they started putting metal plates over their bodies in places where the mail didn't cover it. And then they pretty soon they were covering their whole bodies in plate armor. So they call it a harness of armor because of all the belts and straps on it. So it takes, and my friend John Gibbons loaned me some of these armor pieces. It takes about 30 minutes for the knight and his squire to help him buckle all these, which is why they call it a harness, because of all the leather straps. And the armor, this plate armor would be custom made for the knight that was going to wear it, for his size, for his weight. And a lot of people think medieval armor was so heavy that if a knight got knocked over in battle, he just had to lay there and get killed. Well, he didn't. The armor was strong enough to protect you from axes, from sword blows, but it was light enough and articulated, meaning it moved. You can see this, it's jointed, this gauntlet, so that a fully armored knight in 70 pounds of plate armor could do a running jump onto a moving horse.
Oh, wow.
Lord Deacon can't do that.
Well, Mr. Lee, thank you so much for sharing with us today. Guys, I hope you had a great time with this virtual story time and that you will continue to be a part of our virtual programs all week. This week for our art project, you guys are going to be making a shield, and then with our STEM activity, you'll be building a catapult. We'll see you guys later.